You're terminated effective immediately. The words came from across the polished conference table, delivered with the casual authority of someone accustomed to ending careers before lunch. Victoria Sterling, the newly appointed Chief Operations Officer of Consolidated Manufacturing Systems, didn't even bother looking up from her tablet when she said it. Mid-30s, sharp blazer, West Coast consulting background with zero manufacturing floor experience. She was swiping through budget spreadsheets, stylus in hand, highlighting line items like personal offenses. I sat there, hands folded, watching her decisive leadership performance. My name is Harold Morrison. I'm 57 years old, and I've spent the last 30 years building industrial security systems from the ground up. Transition will be immediate, she continued. Eyes still on the screen. We're bringing security infrastructure in-house. More efficient, better cost control. Behind her sat two people I didn't recognize, Linda Foster from HR clutching a tablet and a younger man in an expensive suit with consultant written all over him. No one from operations, no one from the original security team. Just Victoria and her imported expertise. She finally looked up. Before you go, hand over the security system. All of it. Access credentials, source code, hardware specifications. We'll need everything by end of business today. The room went quiet. Linda shifted uncomfortably. The consultant stopped typing. I didn't move, letting the silence stretch. Victoria's eyebrow raised. Is there a problem? I smiled calmly. The kind you give someone when you know something they don't. I'm afraid I can't do that. Her stylus stopped. Excuse me? The security infrastructure. It's not yours to own. Started working in manufacturing when I was 22, right out of trade school. Spent 6 years on production floors in Michigan before the plant closures hit. Watched my hometown die when the main factory shut down in 1987. 3,000 jobs gone overnight, families scattered, Main Street turned into empty storefronts. That's when I learned something important. When the systems fail, real people pay the price, not executives with golden parachutes. Not consultants with their next client already lined up. The folks who show up every day, clock in, do the work. So I taught myself system integration. Started with basic access control, worked my way up to full facility security networks. The kind of infrastructure that keeps production lines running safely and keeps workers from getting hurt. I don't have a flashy website. Don't post on LinkedIn about digital transformation synergies. My clients find me when their security systems fail and conventional consultants can't figure out why the machinery won't talk to the monitoring computers. That's how I ended up working with Consolidated Manufacturing 4 years ago. Charlie Patterson, their operations director at the time, called me on a Tuesday morning. His voice had that tight edge of someone staring at disaster. Hal, we just failed our 3rd safety audit in 6 months. Insurance is threatening to pull coverage. I need someone who understands how this stuff actually works. Not another consultant who learned manufacturing from PowerPoint presentations. Charlie was old school, came up through the ranks, spent years on factory floors before moving into management. He understood that behind every clean dashboard and automated alert, there's physical infrastructure that has to function without fail. When I walked into their main facility that first day, the problems were immediately obvious. Access control systems from 3 different vendors that didn't communicate. Surveillance networks running on default configurations from 2018. Safety monitoring basically manual. Every shift change, they lost 90 minutes just trying to synchronize security protocols. We've got 5 different platforms that don't integrate, Charlie explained, walking me through the main campus. Physical access uses one system. Digital monitoring uses another. Safety assessment is basically guesswork. Every incident response, we're flying blind for the first hour trying to piece together what actually happened. What Victoria Sterling didn't know. What her consultant and HR team and her entire cost optimization plan had completely missed was that the security infrastructure running Consolidated Manufacturing's 3 production facilities wasn't software sitting on their servers. It was custom-built hardware I owned personally, licensed for their operational use, controlled from equipment they'd never seen. And when they terminated my contract 3 minutes ago, they just disconnected themselves from the only thing keeping their manufacturing facilities secure. The contract we'd negotiated was crystal clear because I'd learned this lesson the hard way years ago. They leased operational access to my security infrastructure for $18,000 per month. I retained complete ownership of all source code, algorithms, and hardware. Charlie signed without hesitation because he understood the difference between using something and owning it. For 4 years, everything ran perfectly. Monthly payments arrived on schedule. The system performed exactly as designed. Charlie would call occasionally with questions about capacity expansion or safety protocol updates, always respectful of the boundaries we'd established. Then Charlie retired. Victoria Sterling arrived 3 weeks later with her MBA from Stanford and her McKinsey portfolio. Her first communication wasn't a greeting or introduction. Subject line, vendor expense analysis. The email was pure corporate optimization language about recurring cost structures and operational dependency reduction. My invoice hadn't changed in 4 years. Same amount, same delivery schedule, same scope of work, but Victoria saw a line item on a budget sheet and immediately assumed there was inefficiency to eliminate. I replied professionally, attaching the original contract and a summary of system performance metrics over the past 48 months. Her response came back within 2 hours. Need to schedule comprehensive review of all external security dependencies. Please prepare full documentation for internal evaluation of operational systems. Operational systems. That phrase told me everything I needed to know about Victoria Sterling. She was the type who thought complex security infrastructure could be understood by reviewing executive summaries and consulting reports. I started preparing not documentation for her evaluation, but the contingency plans I'd need when this conversation went exactly where I knew it was heading. 4 days later, the email arrived that confirmed my suspicions. Subject line, Security Architecture Documentation Request. Victoria wanted a complete copy of the system for internal assessment and potential transition planning. She didn't want to review our service agreement. She wanted to take my system and eliminate the monthly payment. I sent back a response that was technically accurate and deliberately unhelpful. Happy to provide all materials included under your current operational license. Then I walked out to my garage workshop, sat down at the master control panel I'd built specifically for Consolidated Security Network, and started preparing Victoria Sterling's education in the difference between access and ownership. I spent 18 months building them a real system. Not some off-the-shelf package that kind of works if you bend your entire operation to fit it. Custom safety monitoring algorithms that learn the specific behavioral patterns of their 3 facilities. Access control that actually integrated with federal compliance requirements. Equipment monitoring that tracked every credential in real time and flagged safety violations automatically. 180,000 lines of code. Every algorithm, every database structure, every hardware interface built from scratch and tested until it ran without failure. The results were immediate and measurable. 0 safety incidents, no compliance violations, production flowing through the network like precision clockwork. Federal auditors came through twice after implementation and found nothing to flag. Charlie would send me detailed quarterly reports, not corporate thank you notes, but substantive analysis of safety improvements and compliance cost reductions. He understood what he was paying for, and more importantly, what he was getting. 3 days after my documentation response, another email landed. Subject line, Intellectual Property Clarification. Victoria wanted written confirmation that all operational security logic belonged to Consolidated Manufacturing. Operational security logic. That's what she called 4 years of custom safety algorithms, access control protocols, and real-time monitoring engines, like it was a commodity asset she could inventory and reassign. I screenshotted the relevant contract clause and sent it back, bold text, impossible to misinterpret. All system architecture, source code, design logic, and operational infrastructure remains the exclusive property of Harold Morrison. Licensed for operational use only. No transfer, replication, or derivative development permitted without explicit written authorization. Charlie had understood that clause perfectly when he signed it 4 years ago. You don't buy a custom security system like you're purchasing office equipment. You license access to infrastructure that took years to develop and requires constant maintenance from the person who built it. Victoria's response arrived 6 hours later. We will be transitioning to internal security management effective immediately. Final payment will be processed per contract terms. Thank you for your service. That was it. No discussion, no transition planning, no acknowledgement that she was about to disconnect the central nervous system of a 3-facility manufacturing operation. Just corporate speak for you're done and we're keeping your work. I sat at my desk for a long moment staring at that email. Then I walked out to my workshop. Inside that converted 2-car garage sat the physical control infrastructure I'd built specifically for Consolidated's network. Custom hardware interfaces with dedicated circuits for every major subsystem. Access control, surveillance coordination, safety assessment, compliance monitoring, all of it flowing through boards I'd assembled and programmed by hand. Victoria Sterling had no idea that control panel existed. She thought the security system was software running on consolidated servers. She was about to learn the difference between a user interface and actual operational control. 6 days after her termination email, a calendar invite appeared. Security Transition Meeting, Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, no agenda, no context, just a meeting title suggesting she expected this to be a simple handoff conversation. I joined the video call 3 minutes early. Professional appearance, clean button-down shirt, background showing my home office with my trade certifications and safety awards visible on the wall. Victoria logged in 2 minutes late, settling into her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who thinks they've solved a complex problem with simple cost-cutting. Jason Wheeler from IT joined next, according to his screen name. Then a woman who looked fresh out of business school, ready to take notes. "Hal, thanks for joining," Victoria began, her tone suggesting this was routine administrative business. "We've made the decision to bring security management in-house. Appreciate all your work up to this point. But we're ready to assume direct operational control." Assume control. As if reviewing compliance reports was the same thing as running the underlying infrastructure. I kept my expression neutral. "You're terminating the license agreement." "Correct?" "Correct," Victoria said, leaning back like she expected praise for her decisive leadership. "We'll need complete handover of all system repositories, architectural documentation, and back-end credentials. Standard transition process." Jason nodded along. The note-taker typed something into her tablet. They had this choreographed like routine vendor management. "You're not licensed to access the core infrastructure," I said calmly. "Your agreement covers operational use of system outputs. You never purchased ownership rights." Victoria's confident smile faltered slightly. "We paid for development of this security system, HAL. That makes it company intellectual property. This is standard business practice. You paid for operational access to a functioning security network." I replied, "You never bought the underlying technology. That distinction is outlined explicitly in Section 7 of your contract." She glanced off camera, probably pulling up the contract on another screen. I waited while she scanned through language that Charlie had reviewed carefully with their legal team 4 years ago. "Look," she said, attempting to regain control. "We understand there might be some technical nuances here, but we're prepared to handle operations internally going forward. Just provide whatever documentation you have so we can maintain service continuity." "I'll provide everything you're legally entitled to receive," I said, nothing more. The silence across the video call was sharp. Jason looked uncomfortable. The note-taker stopped typing. Victoria's jaw tightened as she realized this wasn't going to be the smooth asset transfer she'd planned. "That'll be fine," she said curtly, trying to end the call quickly. "We'll expect full delivery by close of business today." I didn't respond, just sat there looking directly into the camera while she fumbled with her mouse, clearly wanting to disconnect before I could complicate her timeline further. The screen went black. I closed my laptop. Victoria Sterling thought she understood industrial security because she could navigate software dashboards and review quarterly performance metrics. She had zero comprehension of the physical infrastructure, the custom hardware, the dedicated communication protocols, or the specialized knowledge required to keep it all functioning. She was about to get an expensive education. I walked out to my workshop and powered up the control panel. Every indicator showed green safety monitoring synchronized across 3 facilities. Access credentials updating in real time, equipment networks flowing smoothly through the integrated framework, the entire consolidated manufacturing security perimeter running exactly as I designed it. Then I started building Victoria's transition package. Professional-looking documentation with clean diagrams and impressive technical language. User interface screenshots showing dashboard layouts and data visualization panels. Everything polished and official and completely useless without access to the underlying control systems. I spent 6 hours creating exactly the kind of deliverable Victoria expected to receive. Visual materials that would make her think she'd gotten what she needed to operate independently. Interface mock-ups with animated displays. System diagrams showing logical flow of operations. All of it disconnected from actual infrastructure. By 5:30 p.m., I had a comprehensive package ready. I attached it to an email with a single line. System interface documentation provided per contract termination. Back-end infrastructure access not included per licensing agreement. I hit send and watched the message disappear into Consolidated's corporate email system, where Victoria would soon discover the difference between owning a control panel and owning the engine. Then I walked back to my workshop, sat down at the master control console, and placed my hand on the primary power relay. The real education was about to begin. The next morning, I drove to Frank's Diner like it was any other Friday, small place downtown, good coffee, quiet corner booth where I could work without interruption. Frank had been serving me the same order for 3 years, black coffee, no cream, no sugar, wheat toast. He nodded when I walked in, poured the coffee without asking, and left me alone with my laptop. I opened the administrative console and brought up the main operations dashboard. Every indicator glowed green. Access control functioning smoothly across 87 synchronized entry points at 3 facilities. 1,847 active credentials receiving real-time authorization updates. Everything Victoria Sterling thought she now controlled was actually flowing through the custom hardware sitting in my garage workshop 12 minutes away. At 9:34 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria, having difficulty accessing root management interface. Please provide admin credentials immediately. I stared at the message for about 10 seconds, then deleted it without responding. At 9:41 a.m., I toggled the master relay switch. The map on my screen froze instantly. Every green indicator went gray. Real-time data feeds dropped to 0. Access synchronization stopped mid-cycle. The entire consolidated manufacturing security network just stopped communicating. I took a slow sip of coffee and watched 4 years of perfect security coordination die in complete silence. The system didn't crash or throw error messages. I designed it to disconnect gracefully. No alarms, no warning indicators, no dramatic shutdown sequences, just clean separation from all operational control. If someone tried to restart the user interface, it would load perfectly and display the last cached data, creating the illusion that everything was still working. But underneath, nothing was actually communicating with anything else. For the first 15 minutes, nothing appeared wrong to casual observation. Dashboard displays still showed green status indicators. Security supervisors looking at their screens would see normal access patterns and safety assessments. Guards already on duty would continue following their last received protocols, but no new data was flowing anywhere. I pulled up the security camera feeds I'd integrated into the monitoring system. At 9:58 a.m., I watched an employee badge swipe at building a fail-to-register authorization. The access control protocol was frozen, unable to process real-time credential validation. At 10:07 a.m., 2 employees with conflicting clearance levels both gained access to the same restricted area. According to their dashboard displays, both had valid authorizations for Lab 7 at the northern facility. The conflict prevention algorithm wasn't running. By 1:22 a.m., the ripple effects became visible across the network. Badge readers malfunctioning at 11 major checkpoints. Surveillance blind spots forming at facility entrances. Security schedules showing everything synchronized and operational, but ground reality telling a completely different story. I refreshed my email inbox. Nothing yet. They were probably still trying to figure out why the root management system wasn't responding to login attempts. At 10:39 a.m., the first confused email arrived. Subject line, quick question, access sync delay. Hey Hal, seeing some weird lag on credential updates. Can you take a look when you get a chance? Thanks, Danny Richardson. Danny was one of their senior facility coordinators, former Marines, good instincts. He'd figure out what was happening eventually, but right now he was just seeing symptoms. I didn't respond. By 10:55 a.m., the emails were arriving every few minutes. Badge readers not refreshing. Surveillance gaps at Western Gate. Multiple personnel showing same clearance conflicts. Still polite. Still assuming this was some kind of technical glitch that could be resolved with a quick phone call. At 11:08 a.m., my phone started ringing. Unknown number with consolidated area code. I let it go to voicemail, then another call from a different number, then a third. The panic was beginning. I pulled up the system connection logs and watched failed authentication requests hammering uselessly against the demonstration package Victoria's IT team was trying to operate as live infrastructure. Hundreds of failed handshake attempts, every request bouncing back empty because there was no actual system behind the interface. They were trying to run facility security using only a photograph of the control panel. By 11:43 a.m., the situation had deteriorated significantly. Access control failures at 19 major entry points across 3 facilities. Surveillance coverage conflicts at 23 different monitoring stations. Security protocols falling behind by an average of 78 minutes across the network. At 11:51 a.m., an email arrived with red priority flags. Subject line: "You urgent, critical security failure, multiple access violations, no response from monitoring controls, facilities completely desynchronized. This is affecting compliance status and federal contracts. Need immediate support. Please respond ASAP." Jason Wheeler, Technical Support Manager. The corporate politeness was cracking. They were starting to understand this wasn't a minor technical issue. I closed the email without reading the rest and checked the impact calculator I'd built into my monitoring tools. Conservative estimate: 25,000 in daily losses from compliance violations, failed audits, and contractual breaches. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria: "Emergency situation. Call immediately." I deleted the message. At 12:14 p.m., the phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Consolidated Legal Department. I declined the call and watched it roll to voicemail. Then another call from a blocked number. Declined. By 1 p.m., I had 67 missed calls and 34 unread voicemails. The 3-facility manufacturing operation was experiencing what the military would call a cascading systems failure. Nothing was coordinating with anything else. Security personnel were making access decisions based on stale information. I opened a new document on my laptop and started typing. Emergency system restoration. Terms: payment due via wire transfer before reactivation. Rate: $90,000 lump sum for immediate restoration service. Duration: 72-hour emergency window. Conditions: full acknowledgement of service terms and intellectual property ownership. I attached the document to an email addressed to Victoria Sterling, Legal Counsel, and the Operations Director. Subject line: Emergency restoration services available. Then I hit send and ordered another cup of coffee. The education phase was complete. Now came the negotiation. At 1:31 p.m., the calendar invite arrived. Emergency conference call -2 p.m. Eastern. Immediate response refited. I joined the call at 1:57 p.m. Professional appearance, calm demeanor, sitting in my home office with my safety certifications visible in the background. The screen filled with stressed executives. Rebecca Martinez, Senior Legal Counsel, joined first, sleeves rolled up. The expression of a woman who'd spent the last 3 hours in emergency meetings. Then came more attorneys, one taking rapid notes. Danny Richardson, the facility coordinator I'd worked with during original implementation, appeared next. Former military, understood systems thinking. He looked exhausted but unsurprised. Victoria Sterling was already in the call when I connected, positioned in a small window at the bottom of the screen. Muted microphone, tight body language that suggested she'd been removed from leadership of her own crisis. Nobody said hello. Rebecca cleared her throat and launched straight into damage control. "Hal, appreciate you joining on short notice. We're dealing with what appears to be a significant operational disruption. Our entire security network is essentially paralyzed, and we need to understand our options for immediate restoration." I nodded once. "Your service agreement was terminated yesterday. If you want operational access restored, the terms are outlined in my emergency proposal." One of the attorneys leaned into her camera. "Hal, we've reviewed your proposal. Some of the financial terms seem disproportionate given the circumstances." "Emergency response pricing," I replied. "Standard practice when critical infrastructure fails during business hours." Danny spoke up, his voice tight with controlled stress. "Hal, we've got 3 facilities completely offline. Security breaches accumulating across all campuses. Federal compliance violations by the hour. 2 major clients have called threatening contract termination if we don't restore normal security posture by Monday morning." Rebecca jumped back in. "Look, we understand there may have been some miscommunication during the transition process, but we need to focus on solutions here. Can we discuss modification of the emergency terms?" No, the single word hung in the digital space. No explanation, no negotiation, no corporate back and forth. Just a simple statement of fact. Victoria finally unmuted her microphone. "This is unreasonable, Hal. You're holding our entire operation hostage over a contract dispute." I looked directly into the camera. "You terminated my services and demanded handover of infrastructure you never purchased. I provided exactly what your contract entitled you to receive. Nothing more, nothing less. She started to respond, but Rebecca cut her off with a sharp look. One of the attorneys tried a different approach. Would you consider a modified payment structure? Perhaps installments over a specified period? Wire transfer only. Full payment before reactivation. Danny leaned forward. How? What's the timeline for restoration once payment clears? 45 minutes, I said. System comes back online immediately after I confirm funds transfer. Rebecca looked at her legal team, then back at the camera. We need 15 minutes to discuss internally. Can you hold? I nodded. I'll be here. They clicked into a breakout room, leaving me alone on the call. I took a sip of coffee and checked my email. The emergency proposal had been forwarded to at least 15 different people in their organization, everyone trying to understand how a routine vendor termination had turned into a company-threatening crisis. 12 minutes later, they returned to the main call. Rebecca's expression had shifted from desperation to resignation. Legal is initiating the wire transfer now, should complete within 60 minutes. Let me know when it hits my account, I said. 54 minutes later, my banking app chimed with an incoming transfer notification. Payment confirmed, amount correct, no complications. I walked out to my workshop, sat down at the master control panel, and flipped the relay switch back to active position. Every screen in my garage lit up with green indicators. Access control reconnecting in sequence, safety assessments resuming. Surveillance networks updating in real time. The 3-facility manufacturing security perimeter came back to life like someone had just restarted the circulatory system of a major industrial operation. I returned to the video call where everyone was still waiting. System is operational, I announced. All services restored. Rebecca nodded. We appreciate the rapid response. I didn't do this rapidly, I said evenly. I did this according to the terms you agreed to. Nobody responded. Victoria's camera was still on, but she hadn't said a word since her hostage comment. I left the call without ceremony. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Danny Richardson. Victoria Sterling had been quietly reassigned to a consulting role with no operational responsibilities. The board had conducted an internal review of the incident and implemented new policies requiring legal approval before terminating any critical infrastructure contracts. Word spread quickly through the industry. My phone started ringing with new clients. Manufacturing companies who'd heard the story and wanted someone who understood the difference between access and ownership. The demand for real expertise, it turned out, was higher than I'd ever imagined. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the National Manufacturing Security Conference. The title of my presentation, Protecting What You Create. The critical difference between licensing and ownership. Protect what you create before you're forced to defend it. Read every contract. Understand every clause. Know the difference between licensing access and surrendering ownership. When someone tries to take what's yours, don't get angry. Don't get loud. Just smile calmly and say, I'm afraid I can't do that. It's not yours to own. Then watch them learn the difference between confidence and competence.